Hey, you. My guest for today is somebody who has coached leaders from over 25 countries in the last decade. He's an executive coach who uses different modalities such as serious Lego play, somatic experiences, coupled with yoga practices. He's worked for companies such as Google, Accenture, and Amazon, and is the founder of Zensei, his coaching platform that helps teams and leaders to perform better both in their work as well as life. Please join me for this fascinating conversation with the talented, inspiring, and creative Hariprasad Varma. You can check him out on Instagram at zenze.hari. And with that, let's jump into this conversation. Hi, Hari.
Hi, Paden.
So, we have been trying to get each other, and this was the time that we could make it.
True. I think it's been long pending.
Before we get started, I think a fun fact for everybody who's tuning in, Hari and I used to be ex-colleagues in Google. And that was years ago, right, Hari? At that point in time, I think nobody would have thought that you would have taken a creative path and I would have followed. And, life goes one whole circle, and how we are having a conversation now today.
True, very true. I think it's been quite an unexpected but very fulfilling journey.
Absolutely. So that's what I want to hear from you about this creative path that you have taken. So I think a good place to start would be, how did you transition from a full-time job after working in such amazing companies such as Google, Accenture? So could you talk about the transition from a full-time job to a creativepreneur?
The journey was quite unexpected. So if you were to ask me what defined the journey, it is more about really deeply listening to where am I at each stage. And I think that helped me to know what is the next step, which is also what essentially my path has been quite transformed through yoga and inner work practices anchored around yoga. Which happened when I was in Accenture. And even before Accenture, there was this inner calling to do something that is meaningful, fulfilling, and for which I can experience a tangible change in the other. And to that extent, I think what you're seeing today as my journey is my second experiment. First one was after Google. I had spent quite a bit of time trying to crack the civil service exam, which then after 4 years I rejoined corporate. And then I think that impulse to do something for myself where there's a more alignment between my aspiration and the outer action. I think essentially that's what led to this journey. Yeah.
So it is interesting because I think everybody who I talk to about how they, most people leave their corporate journeys to start something creative of their own. It isn't obviously a easy path, right? So could you talk about what were the specific challenges that you faced when you were, like you just mentioned, you tried civil services, which I didn't know for, and how did that journey land you first into your yoga practices? Because I think I can speak for myself, and even for people who get into spirituality and get into yoga specifically, there is some defining moment or an aha moment where you feel called towards.
So to give a general context, I had a background in yoga from childhood, in my upbringing during my school days, but I never took to yoga as a practice in my daily life. The yoga as we popularly know it, the asana practice or the breathwork practices, because as a young boy I found it very boring. So in school, when we had an option to choose between yoga and karate, I pursued karate for 8 years. And to my surprise, I was one belt before black belt, and my sensei told me that post black belt, which is the 10th belt, to progress, yoga was mandatory at each stage, where we had to improvise and come up with some original sequences and things. So I used to wonder, what? I chose karate over yoga, and now after black belt, you need to start yoga.
The irony.
Yeah. So, but the funny thing is, at that time, the entrance exam and all that caught up, and I never completed my black belt. So I now got into yoga also. Yoga came to me at a point where, as I mentioned, I had this one phase where I was trying to crack the civil service exam, and the kind of practices that were with me at that point was more in the realm of energy work. But when I rejoined corporate world, the timings and the shifts of the work was really messing up with my system. After a while, I noticed that the health was taking a toll, my diet was going off track, and I didn't really connect to gym as a workout modality. So back in Google, when we were there, I had done a counselor training program with a very renowned psychotherapist in Hyderabad. So one of the faculty members was a yoga teacher. So I reached out to him saying, I see that I'm getting too off track with my health. Can you design something for me? Because he was specialized in designing personal practice. He connected me to my first teacher, Mamta, in Hyderabad. And I got introduced in a very formal way to the tradition I teach now, which is the Krishnamacharya tradition of yoga, where there's a lot of focus on personalizing a practice to the capability and the limitations or the potential of the student. And
Right.
I think that really transformed my perspectives, because it was, one, personalized. Two, there was a lot of anchorage in the yoga philosophy, the Yoga Sutras, and which does phenomenal work with helping you become aware of your meaning making processes. So I found that the more I started getting into the practice on a regular basis, I could start seeing at a deeper level what patterns are not serving me, and I could see them slowly start transforming. So that inspired me to take up more serious study of yoga about 10 years back.
Wow, that is inspiring. So, how did you mix, or how did professional coaching, like you mentioned, that you use a lot of tools such as serious play, live theater, somatic experiences? So, these are different tools. So, how did that intermingle with, or how do you mix yoga practices with that to help your clients?
So, as you rightly said, all these are different modalities. So today, my practice is in a range of spectrum between proper therapy and trauma healing to coaching, executive coaching, life coaching, relationship coaching, to energy work. So that's the broad spectrum or the range I operate in. Majority of the work currently is in leadership development and coaching. Now, coming to how these I discovered or interconnected these, as I said, I first got introduced to yoga practice, which was very personalized in yoga philosophy. What I noticed was when a practice is really meeting the need of the individual, it becomes very creative. So that inspired me to first get trained in teacher as a yoga teacher. It was a 2-year program. Then I got trained as a yoga therapist, where we work with therapeutic conditions. It is a 3-year program. So all this happened while I was working parallelly. At that time, I did my trainings from an institute in Chennai called Yoga Vahini under my teacher Saraswati Vasudevan. And I happened to meet my mentor who first introduced me to this way of interconnecting yoga philosophy with applied behavioral science and coaching, Sri Rakhuanantha Narayanan, who's a co-founder of Ritambara. He was one of the direct disciples of Krishnamacharya, who is known as the father of modern yoga. What I discovered as I learned with him, and I learned with some of the communities I'm part of, Yoga Vahini, Ritambara, that there is if you go into a certain depth in any of the Indian knowledge systems, there is a fundamental unity that you discover. And it is very much in alignment with how, if you read some of our mythologies, in order to excel in any field, there was a prerequisite that you needed to be a yogi. Because the practice of yoga is actually a practice of bringing in a coherence and alignment between your inner world and outer actions. The more you're able to embody that, definitely you also develop the capacity, act in a way that has excellence and impact, and also define and discover what is your innate action that can bring fulfillment and joy to you, and not get stuck in a very mechanical cog in the wheel kind of a monotony. So for me, first criteria or the factor that influenced this kind of work was meeting great mentors and teachers like Saraswati Vasudevan, Rakhuanantha Narayanan, and then this whole host of other mentors I found. I discovered Lego Serious Play as a very embodied, tactile way of working with Lego bricks. So I had my mentor, he's from Japan, Masao Ishihara, where I found that by the time I reached and started understanding and getting trained in this facilitation modalities, I had gone a little deep into the practice of yoga, Yoga Sutras. I had started working a lot with Mahabharata archetypes, again from my mentor, where I found that there are so much of richness in the mythology and the archetypes, which has universal applicability. So I used to organize these retreats across India and abroad. And I found that when I started working with stories from our folk traditions, from mythology, there was a certain resonance that was carried across cultures. And combining storytelling, theater, applied behavioral science, yoga, that kind of organically evolved. And I remember at one point I was suddenly started getting an interest in music during COVID time. So I started learning music with one of my friends, teachers in Bangalore. But as I listened to the ragas and the melodies, I could feel a lot of emotional shifts happening within me. That led me to co-create with her a series of programs called Raga Yoga, where we explored different melodies and ragas of music, connecting them to the 9 primary emotions, the Navarasas in Indian dance tradition, using them to help individuals unpack how do they experience life, what meaning do they make of their events in life, and things like that. So yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying that it is very lot of grace of having met great mentors and of also having had the space and time to just allow those practices to first sink in and then organically. And I think I had a knack for interconnecting things earlier also, so I think it just fell in place.
I want to go back to a little earlier to what you said that yoga practices, when they are made personal, like for a person specifically, it becomes more creative. I think a lot of yoga that is popular, at least in the mainstream,
Mhm.
is that power yoga or asanas, or it's more surface level.
Mhm.
Whereas if you go in depth on this subject, as you mentioned, making it personalized for somebody, what does that really mean? What does that practice look like? Because I'll tell you, for me, my yoga practice started a couple of years ago, almost 10 years back, when I lost my mother.
Mhm.
And it was a deeply spiritual shift that happened. And prior to that, my life was going on in a different trajectory. It was money, it was success, it was career, and there was no meditation practice, there was no spirituality. And it just took a 360-degree turn, if you will. So I think that was my personal discovery, or how I fell into any sort of a meditation practice. So could you talk a little bit about what does it mean to have these yoga practices personalized for a working professional who goes to like a 9 to 9 job?
So, see, when I say a practice that is personalized, first of all, it means the practice should be able to meet the need of the person in that moment. So, one very simple criteria my teacher has told us is your practice helping you take the next step? Do the next thing in the best possible manner. If not, the practice is wrong. For instance, let's say you have a sleep challenge. You might be doing yoga, but you may not be sleeping well. And sometimes when I speak to people who share about this and ask, what is your practice? When do you practice? So I say, I have work till 7 o'clock in the evening. I go to a power yoga class, which is essentially very intense practice. And I personally don't believe it is to be a yoga practice of
Yes.
how we define it traditionally. Anyway, but when you engage in such an intense activity so late in the evening, definitely that's not going to support getting a good sleep. Or like you mentioned in your scenario, when you are going through a grief, uh, the practice has to first take into account what state the person is. So if somebody is going through pain, the practice should support feeling a sense of relief, pacify. So in your
Right.
we speak about 3 stages in which you design a practice. First is when you are having a very lot of pain or whatever due to whatever condition, things like that. You design a practice that is having the quality of shamanam in Sanskrit. Shamanam means to pacify. Then once you help the person develop the stamina or the resilience and the strength to work better, you do a shodhanam practice. Shodhanam is cleansing. So it is more intense. It because it might also require the person to look more honestly at how they are co-creating that, and then get ready to move into a state where the practice can help them experience arogyam, holistic health. So there are different spectrum, and also the practice changes with age. One of the senior most teachers in Krishnamacharya tradition, Srivatsa Ramaswamy, he is 84 or so right now. He has written a very beautiful book called Yoga for the 3 Stages of Life. So it talks about how traditionally, when you're a young child, growing up, maybe in your 7 to 20 years age, the kind of practice is called Shakti Krama, where the practice is intense, can be intense because the body is still growing, it is exploring its potential. So
Right.
you do all acrobatics and stuff like that. But once you cross 20, 21, you achieved your growth, and then the practice shifts gears into what is called Rakshana Krama. Rakshana means to protect, because the body has
Right.
already developed a certain limitations, potency. How do you retain it during your middle life? As you move into an older age, the practice ideally need to take into account that it becomes less physical but more spiritual. So it's called Adhyatmika Karma, that is more tuned into understanding the self more. Now, at any of these stages, if you have a accident or a injury or any therapeutic, the person shifts into a different kind of practice called Chikitsa Krama. Chikitsa Krama means a therapeutic practice, and that can
Right.
happen at any point in time. But generally, this is the way you personalize by understanding who the person is at a first level, where are they in their life, what are they going through, what is the next step that they need to take. So, essentially, a person who designs a personalized practice, a teacher needs to meet the student where they are, know what is creating the sorrow for them at that point in time, the suffering. And the goal of yoga, as per Yoga Sutra, is Heyam, Dukkham, Anagatam, to prevent future dukkham or sorrow. That's what is creating it today.
Right.
Then you need to know what is the aspirational goal. Then you need to develop an intelligent practice. It's called upaya. When these three elements come into play in alignment with each other, it becomes a very personalized practice.
What I hear, Hari, is about what you shared just now, that the surface level knowledge that some, like most people, would probably have about yoga in general is obviously not going to help them if they're going through different stages in their lives, right? And they first need to identify what stage of life they are in, right?
Person themselves may not know it, which is why you need to have a good teacher. The teacher
Right.
will be equipped to know it. For the person, if you are a student, for instance, listening to this, how do you know whether I'm doing the right practice? The simple thumb rule is, are you able to do the thing that you want to do in a better manner after practice? If it is sleep, are you able to sleep better? If you are going through grief, is your grief ability to handle grief getting better? If it is something else, if you are having a neck pain and the pain increase after practice, it's a wrong practice. So look at what is the reason for me entering this practice. If I'm not moving in that direction, it's a wrong practice. It doesn't mean you are not capable of the practice. It means the teacher is not doing the right practice for you.
And that practice is not aligned for that person, for that individual.
Right.
It might not be right for somebody, but it might be right for somebody else.
No, there is a practice that is right for everyone. So if
Right.
you are not experiencing the right result, it means whoever you are learning from has not designed the right practice for you. It's not because
Interesting.
yoga is not for you. So
No,
fine.
but certain practices
Hmm.
in yoga, like you just mentioned, like say if forward bends, for example, in asana practices, if somebody has like a lower back issue, if they are doing a lot of forward bends, that might not be ideal for somebody with a lower back pain, or like a lot of back bends for somebody who has like a lower back pain, or something like that. Like something which is not personalized for that individual is what I'm saying.
That's true. That's true. Because
That makes
even in a personalized practice, for every posture, there are so many ways in which you can receive the benefit of the posture without getting into the form. So in
right.
Krishnacharya tradition, the focus is on how do you experience the function of a posture even if you cannot reach the form. That is very
Interesting.
different from a lot of the popular practice where they try to somehow get you push and pull into a certain form, which
Right.
result in injury in the end.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to move to this next topic, Hari, about you mentioned that you were lucky enough to learn from a lot of mentors and a lot of teachers. So could you talk about the role of how important it is? Because today I think in our fast-tracked world, information is so easy to be received online and with scrolling, endless scrolling, that I think there is a loss of the old tradition where we used to learn, or at least generations before, we used to get knowledge from elders or from teachers, right? So that culture, that loss of tradition has somehow impacted our culture, you think? And how that has impacted, like, say, somebody working in a professional life, more added stress, you would say, more relationships getting impacted. So, what is the toll taken of not good or not having good enough mentors or not looking for mentors?
Mm. See, I would like to first differentiate between a guru, a teacher, a mentor, and a coach, because some of the
Please do.
things that you mentioned has those connotations.
Right,
When you learn something, traditional knowledge system like yoga or let's say Vedic chanting, there is these are handed over through a lineage. Like I mentioned, I teach in the lineage of Krishnamacharya and the Shikachar tradition. So when
right,
I say that, it is a guru shishya parampara. So there is a so that is one dynamic. But even there, I think the important learning I have had from my uh, teachers is guru is actually within you. Guru is that which takes the veil of darkness. So it could be even nature. It could be any person that helps you
right,
discover that. Now it can come in the form of a teacher also, right?
right,
But essentially that is one concept. Teacher is, of course, you learn a field of where somebody is an expert in a particular field. You become a student, an apprentice, and you learn, giving that positional authority of subject matter expertise to a person. Uh, and there I do feel perhaps there is a role for elders by virtue of the lives they have lived, the experiences they have gone through. There's a lot of wisdom that one can access.
right,
Equally important in that is also peer learning. And I have received a lot through my peers in
right,
different communities, both coaches and therapists. And I think that is also one essential part that is missing, not just the elders.
right,
There is a real challenge of developing peerage, and how do we engage? Because at one level, when there's a authority figure, it is still easy to look up based on, you can either become a dependent or a counter dependent, and both ways you establish a relationship. But
right,
if you are like you and I, for example, we are peers. How do you establish a peerage and then be open to learning and feedback? And sometimes I think that's one of the toughest things to crack in today's time,
absolutely.
because then you have to deal with the not so nice elements of competitiveness, envy, a lot of other. But it's also a great gift to practice if we have the right kind of community of practitioners. As far as coach is concerned, when you are with a coach, they don't give you anything. They just hold your space to, or as a coach, I hold space for the person to discover the already inherent wisdom they have. So these are three different aspects altogether. And from what you're asking, I resonate with the fact that there is a lot of challenge in today's time to learn from teachers, and we may need to really look at how do we really engage with the wisdom of the elders, while also knowing and trusting your own inner wisdom when it comes to taking the path forward.
Right,
Both I feel is important, because like one of my first gurus or teachers was Swami Chimyananda, phenomenal speaker, orator, and what do you say, proponent of Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita. Um, so one of the things he mentions, I still recall, it was a talk he gave in 1991 in Bombay to a youth.
right,
He said, when you learn, you need to learn from your elders, from the past, fully, knowing that whatever they have done, they may have done with honesty and good intention. But
right,
you need to have the courage and conviction to evaluate it against your contemporary reality, take forward what is best for you ahead. And I think I always go back to that whenever there's a sense of doubt about, because a lot of what I do, I improvise. As you said, creatively work with both traditional knowledge, Yoga Sutras, uh, wisdom from Mahabharata, but I also integrate that with Lego serious play, sometimes with flow game.
Right.
So a lot of my work is in that bringing the interconnections and things. So sometimes these words create a certain sense of faith that okay, I can co-hold honoring what I have received and still honor my own potency and creativity as I take forward things in my own way.
That's beautiful, Hari, what you just said, because I think what I took from that is you can learn from your mentors, but you can also tap into your inner wisdom and make decisions which are right for you in the moment. Because the elders of the past did what they did with the best information they had at that time, which might not necessarily work in today's existence. Not all of it, at least.
True.
Okay, so that is beautiful. I want to go back to what you said about specifically about peer learning. And this is such an interesting topic because I find it very fascinating. Because when I started personally, I was of this mindset that everybody who wants or who's doing what I want to do is a competition for me. And this was 8+ years back. I would like to think I'm a little wiser today, that they are not competition, but they are a mirror to what is possible. So if I was looking at somebody and saying, oh, this person is doing fantastic work, there was a sense of jealousy. There was a sense of, will I be able to do that? Do I have the capability? And of course, there was a sense of insecurity. But today, where I am, I think this is interesting because you rightly said about peer learning that it is easy to fall into that trap, right? To look at somebody and say, hey, he or she is doing such fantastic work. And how do I learn from this person? How do I collaborate with this person? So, could you talk a little bit about how do you deal with it? Has it ever been an issue for you? I know certainly it has for me, and I have worked on it. So, could you talk about that?
I think we all learn and grow and make our own ways of making sense of these ideas of collaboration, of peer age. I think starting off my journey when I first quit Amazon and got first established my first yoga venture before this current coaching venture, I had started collaborating with fellow yoga teachers. And what I realized is even within field like yoga, there is a lot of sense of insecurities and competitiveness and things like that that can come up. And I did not know how to engage with it because at one level I felt upset and I felt angry about it. Then I chose to a decision that okay, I think I'm better off doing things on my own. So I took a step back, tried to figure things out by myself.
Right.
I got involved with communities, as I said, of practitioners, where we started working together, learning together in different ways. And as I started getting more into process work and applied behavioral science kind of areas, we always had two co-facilitators doing programs together, or two or more. And that's when I started realizing there's a lot we can learn through resonant learning. There are certain things I see, there are certain things that are my shadows which others see, or my
Right.
co-facilitator will see. So I started enjoying a lot of what came up in our pre-work, in our debriefs after the sessions, how we start. And the more I started understanding group dynamics and how groups learn and how groups move through that cycle of first being dependent on the authority figure and then discovering their independence, then learning to be interdependent. I figured that's also our journey in some ways. When we grow being very dependent to our parents, then we rebel, we become independent. Then at some point we figure that okay, the world is a very interdependent ecological space where each person has its own path and growth and value and position. So I think personally for me, the journey has been on discovering what is my true belonging. How do I claim my ground, meaning my truth, where I stand? So the more I compare with another person, I figured it's not doing justice to the choices, risks, and things I have taken for myself. And, and the more closer I became aware of my own journey, I figured it is not absolutely not comparable with any other person's choice. There may have been people who quit corporate to do yoga, people who had quit corporate to become coaches. But what I have taken as choices, how I have worked with these ideas, all of us are a category of one. So I think having that awareness become more embodied will help one feel more sense of belonging and to claim where you stand. And I think when you're able to claim your ground, rest falls in place. Then there is very little need to be anxious or insecure about other people's journey. And I think that's when collaborative spirits can emerge. So today I
Absolutely.
do collaborate a lot with artists, theater professionals, facilitators. But a lot of my collaboration also comes from a space of wanting to really play with a group of people in a joyful manner. So when there is a sense of play, when there's a sense of freedom, and I know that, okay, irrespective of the outcome, whether people come or not come, this process of jamming with another person will be a joyful experience, then I take that step. So all the co-facilitators I work with, that is one compass I look for, that I'm able to play well with them. Otherwise, everybody can have different. So it's, I think, coming to the core of it, I think there's a beautiful question in Flow Game, which really served me in the last 2 years. It's about the question that came to me when I played the game. So Flow Game is a modality where you ask a question and the game powerful questions that you to work with. So this was one question which I received as a gift in my first Flow game, which was, what is the playground that you wish to create for yourself? Who are the playmates you want to invite? And I think that is what's coming up to me as a one-liner in response to your question. I think it's about claiming. Only if I claim my ground, I know what kind of playground I'm creating. Only then I know what kind of playmates I want on my ground.
That is beautiful, Hari. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that question warrants repetition. What is the playground you're creating, and who are the playmates you want to play with?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that is so beautifully that you put it, that spirit of oneness. I think I deeply resonate with what you just said, because I think that was my key. All that sense of pent up sense of competition, insecurity, jealousy was coming from a space that I did not know what I wanted to create for myself. And you beautifully also said that someone can do things for their reasons, but you chose your reasons, your decisions. They are unique to you. So they make sense to you. And if you judge that based on what someone else is doing or is not doing, then you are questioning yourself in the process, right? Like, and that doesn't make sense, because you are creating your life. The purpose why you are here is because of the choices that you are making, and with a sense of that oneness, because at the end of life, we're going to look back and we're going to see the choices that we have made. And then we're going to understand all the bad choices, wrong choices, which we judged were just experiences at the end of it. True?
That's true. And you were also right when you set up that question, how you mentioned about the mirror. I think that's very true. Even if I end up feeling competitive, it mirrors my aspiration and my underlying belief that I could match this, or
Right.
it's a potential I can manifest for myself. Or when you get inspired by somebody, I think these are all various mirrors. Anybody you encounter is a mirror, and whatever I gain as a evocation or a provocation in response to another person tells more about me than the other. So I can use and build on what's happening to me to take the next step.
Absolutely. I think with age, they say wisdom comes, because when I was in my late 20s, this would have definitely not resonated with me. I would have thought, what is this? But yes, I think if you're open and if you're willing to learn, and when you are ready, then the teacher appears.
Totally agree.
That's amazing. Okay, the next question I want to ask you is, when you made that shift from working full time and then you got into creating Zenze, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, yeah, your coaching venture. Of course, it was not easy, but you started your yoga practices and you were learning from your mentors. Can you talk about how uncertain success is as a entrepreneur? Because I can speak for myself that for almost 3 years, I did not make much money, right? And from everybody's lens, it was like, what are you doing with your life? And you are quote unquote failing. So how was that for you?
Good question. I think I took certain steps before I quit my job.
Right.
One is that I had a growing realization that I am built in such a way that if I don't love something, I can't continue doing it. So after Google, I break to pursue civil service. Then I came back to corporate, and then
Right.
So I found that every time money and everything else was in place, unless I feel fully emotionally invested, it is anyway going not to last, and I put in suboptimal performance. I'm not exploring my potential. So I had a very deep awareness of this. But then I was also very acutely aware, if I'm going to quit this, I'm losing out on the shares, on the stable income, the promotions. And I had no reference point in my life from my family for somebody who done this kind of a very drastic turn, and not knowing where it will go, because this was back in 2016 when I had to quit, and we didn't have so much of remote working and all that at that point. So one thing I did was I sat with myself to ask, what will define abundance and success for me right now? And for me at that point, what I found, one pattern was I used to always look at all my leaves at the start of the year, accumulate them, work on weekends, go for a long trek, and then I'll meet some amazing people. So one thing I felt, I wanted more control over my time. If I felt like I met somebody interesting, I want to have a long, nice conversation, I need to do that before, without feeling limited by somebody by asking me to come back to work. So for me, some of these things around time, the choice to explore the world, engage with people, these became my meaning making criteria for my sense of abundance. And like you, when I quit, for the first 6 months, I didn't have a single student or client. But I had this one backup option of working as a digital consultant for a company, daily, designing marketing programs for them. So that kept the financial buffer going. But then things started moving. And then by the end of the first year, I earned almost equally as I was earning in Amazon. So that was a different case. But what I'm saying is, beyond the monetary, I first sat with myself to redefine what this means to me. For me, success was not success if I just earned money. Anything that comes at the cost of me not feeling alive was not success. Feeling fully alive, fulfilled became my primary criteria for being successful. And I was lucky that I didn't have too many other people who disagreed with me around me, including my parents. So they said, okay, you're happy, we are happy, fine. That kind of a scenario. So that way I was lucky. And then I met mentors and peers who also kind of took very different paths in their life. So I could see that, oh, I'm not the only one. There are other people on this path. So I think that sense of community also helped. Currently, and again, coming to Zensei was the Zensei. I would love to tell the story of this name, because I started off on the yoga front. After yoga, started with Yogashala, and I started doing a lot more of coaching, leadership development work. And then I figured that, okay, I think now I would like to consolidate and build on leadership, because what I found lacking in today's leadership was a certain sense of leading from within, with the awareness of who am I, where am I, and doing what I'm doing, what am I really doing, that kind of a deep awareness. And the price people are paying, organizations, leaders, as well as employees, they were paying for that was by their health. It's a very people, like right now I'm doing somatic experiencing training. I've been off the sessions to our ex-Google community, and I can see that even within senior corporate leadership levels, there's so much of trauma through so much of events that keep unfolding in today's uncertain world. But are we having the awareness to even register what's happening to us? So the Zensei, when I formulated, it was more like Zen. It is a combination of my sensei from karate days. Sei means mentor in Japanese, and Zen I chose instead of Sen. Zen I chose because when I looked at the etymology of Zen, it comes from Dhyan in Sanskrit.
Wow.
So Dhyan became Chan or Chen in Chinese, and then when it moved to Japan, it became Zen. When I looked at that, the way I engage with my coaching, leadership development is all anchored. The primary blueprint is from Yoga Sutras, Sankhya philosophy, anchored in yogic and mindfulness practices. So it made sense. And for me, when I coined this term, I found that, this is the integration I'm doing. I'm trying to connect the yoga philosophy with Lego serious play, Mahabharata with these modalities. That's what I learned from my mentors. So I found that this interdisciplinary way of my functioning and the term really showcases the integration I also wish to share with organizations and teams I work with.
When you mention creative leadership or leadership that comes from within, we all carry baggage, but to be aware of that baggage is very, very difficult, right? And especially in a role of leadership, there have been instances where, like, a manager would carry their problems to work and probably take it out on their juniors. And that is not a healthy work environment. And you also said that especially leaders are paying the price with their health, in terms of mental health, in terms of physical health. So, could you talk about how important is creative leadership in terms of, first, the person needs to be aware of his or her trauma, whatever that trauma looks like, and how he or she is not, or they are not trickling down that to their juniors. So, why is it so important, and how does your work really bring that benefit to these upcoming leaders?
See, I think first we need to understand what we understand by trauma, because that's also very commonly used these days. So, from a neuroscience perspective, when we encounter life and when there is a challenging situation, challenging as in if there's a threat that we perceive,
Right.
system gets into a fight response, in which case you get anger, rage builds up to fight it out, or you get fearful, you move away from the scenario, you get into a
Right.
fight response. If both of this is perceived as being unsafe, that you can neither fight nor flee, you get into a freeze mode. And these are the three primary modalities of coping, that the active defense mechanism of the nervous system. There's also something which is added later called fawning, which is like pleasing, more thing. Now, what happens is this is a universal phenomenon across animals and human beings. It happens, but unlike in animals, in our, because we have a well developed cortical brain, when the event passes and I perceive that okay, I'm okay, we don't do anything with that excess build up energy. If you watch Animal Planet or National Geographic, if you watch deer being chased by a tiger, even if the deer outruns the tiger, you will see that it still runs for a fair degree of time, maybe even go into a river and tries to wade against the current of the river, all to release that excess flight energy from the system. Very spontaneous, intuitive thing they do. We don't do that. So what happens is, when activation happens in the nervous system and we don't become aware of what exactly happened now, it gets lodged in the body. And as it accumulates, even yoga has parallel concepts about this, how the movement of prana gets impacted and things like that. What happens is, you start in SC language, somatic language, you start overcoupling unrelated things. So when you have experienced a certain threat, let's say a layoff, which is quite common now,
Right.
a certain sequence of actions led to the layoff. Now, if something relating to that kind of phenomena happens in a new organization, if this is not resolved, the person will project the fear onto whoever is taking the action. So they will act out the residual fear or anger on something else. So it gets deflected. So to answer your question, first step is to be aware what is really held in my system from my past experiences. For that, there are very simple, very powerful somatic practices which can be integrated into daily life that helps one become more listening to one's own body. What I have often observed with leaders is I conduct many leadership labs and executive coaching. Vocabulary to articulate how am I feeling itself is very rare, because we are so, like, if I ask how do you feel now, 90% of the time the responses that I receive are what you think. So you have to keep drilling, reflecting back, and then finally, oh, so this is the feeling, this is thinking. Okay. So we have to start developing the capacity to identify how I feel, build that emotional vocabulary, which is also a practice of listening to what's happening to me. And second, what's happening to my body. Like, there's a difference between the feeling, emotions, and the sensations in the body. Like when you get angry, for instance, sometimes you see the sensation of the ears getting red, there'll be heat up in the body. So that's a sensation. Or when fear, the body contracts. Like even in yoga, we say sukham and dukkham. Kham means space. So dukkham is contraction of the inner space. Sukham is expansion of the inner space. So, but these are very tangible, tactile sensation that we experience. So I think bringing this awareness to leaders is very important, because what then can happen is let's say you do a one-on-one with your reportee, you will be able to start sensing where they are if you are aware of where you are. So if you can self-regulate your nervous system when you encounter another person who is going through a anxiety or something else, you will be able to co-regulate each other's nervous system to bring more choicefulness. The end result is you become more choiceful of how you can respond to a scenario, which is very crucial in today's time. If you are building an agile team or making choices on the go, if you want to avoid getting into a reactive space, this kind of embodied awareness is very important.
I remember when I was working in corporate, there was this phrase, which I'm sure you must have heard, that people don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I think it was, in fact, personally, if I can say, it was one of the reasons why I also was encouraged to start my first business, because I had had enough of bad leaders managing me. But okay, so coming to the point that you just made about your body storing up pent up traumatic energy. So, how critical is daily mindfulness practices for not just leaders, but for everybody who is working in any sort of a job or a profession? A lot of narrative in today's world is people think this is my job and this is my life, like as though they were separate. So, what would you say to somebody who treats their work or their profession different from their life? And what basic practices could one embody to live a more healthier or a more peaceful life while they're also working in a profession?
So first thing, I want to acknowledge that we all have gone through that phase of looking at work life hyphenated way.
Right.
And if any of the listeners are associating that kind of a work-life balance, because these are common challenges that come up in coaching sessions also, I think one awareness we need to keep for ourselves is that it's not just about us. It is also a product of a historical way in which modern industrial complex developed work in a certain manner. In the post-industrialized society, it became important to delineate factory system as a way where people came to be treated as resources. Even now we use human resource team, no HR.
Yes.
That entire terminology or framing itself reduces a person to a resource to be exploited or
Right.
optimal utilization, all that kind of a thing. So I think we need to first acknowledge that this is a larger systemic reality, as a consequence of which we also end up splitting ourselves into work life kind of a hemisphere. Now, how do we engage with it, as you are asking? I think it starts with reframing how I look at myself. Who am I? A lot of times when I do coaching with very senior leaders in big companies, what I find is for many of them, the entire role and identity of who am I gets overlaid with their organizational identity.
Right.
And sometimes when the actual question they come to the session might be, I'm not able to take so much time out for my family members. Then when I work with them, I see that, okay, you have X number of leaves in a year, but all the leaves are getting lapsed. You're not even taking the leaves that is default available on your weekend because you're investing in, because you're excited about work, whatever really the reason. Slowly, they start realizing that, oh, my entire sense of who am I is so overshadowed by the company or the organization that there's no space for other parts of me. Even for people to avail whatever is available to live in a more balanced way, it needs to first start with examining how am I looking at who am I. And in the who am I question, if I can start integrating more parts of me as a son, as a husband, as a brother or a sister, mother, I think then whatever will follow, because then those parts will also find a place in your decision making processes. If you take on, like many men take on the role of a nurturer, provider, so a lot of times they never spend time with their kids or just go out and keep working, but they genuinely feel this is what they are meant to do. Or for women for that matter, in different ways each people play out their roles. uh, Gaining a deeper awareness of who am I, knowing that what I'm doing right now need not define. I can be, and this is one of the principal axioms in process work. You can be this, that, and more. Most of us are able to even go beyond I am this. to say I am
Right.
also that and also more and also. So I think a process of discovering, having that curiosity to know what more can I be, will help us not get crystallized into one straitjacketed role, because that's where all the imbalance begins.
That's interesting because I think a lot of people just limit their identity to I am this. I'm the VP of this company and that's what I am and that's it. And all the other roles of my life may get
Discuss.
discarded or not being given their due responsibilities. Hari, okay, so I have a final question for you. What is that one hill that you would like to die on? For the rest of your life, you could talk about one thing that could help you or someone else. What is that hill that you would love to die on?
I think the one thing would be on play well. I think this is something when I was getting trained in Lego serious play, we were told about what Lego means. So essentially, they started off as a toy company, right? And
Yes.
they developed this method called serious play, which is a organizational development method and team coaching method. And the more I learned and started integrating that with my work, one of the things I figured is I was getting too serious about my work, about working with trauma, identity, this. And slowly I started figuring that I think all I want actually, like I said earlier, playground, playmates. I want to bring in a sense of lightness and play. And more we learn to play, we will learn to embody whatever we are learning and growing. So I think
Wow.
playing well for me captures everything, because it has in its collaboration, it has in its healthy competition, it has in its excellence, it has in its fun, lot of fun. So I think that's what I would say.
Isn't it ironic that as children, nobody had any trouble telling us, or nobody needed to tell us that go play, go have a nice time? And as adults, we have to learn. We have to pay somebody to tell us, okay, this is what you need to do. It is ironic, but I think that is so needed because there are like the mental health space, the physical space of working professionals today is what it is because we are not introducing enough play
Yeah,
in our lives.
because to play
That's
you need to agree to be vulnerable. You need to agree to hold things lightly, and you also need to agree to rigor. That's why it's a serious play. Yeah,
right.
it has its depth also, if you
Right.
are willing to look at it.
So that is beautiful. Thank you so much, Hari, for your time. Is there something that you would like to add before going?
No, it was great reconnecting with you, Paden, and I think I really enjoyed. Didn't know we crossed a
Where the time flew.
yeah. So I really
Yes.
enjoyed being in this conversation and on actionables, and all the best with all that you're
Thank you
doing.
so much for your time, Hari.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And that does it for this episode. If you enjoyed, check out Hari on Instagram at zenze.hari. And you can connect with me on Instagram at lifecoachpaden or at Goals with Paden. Till next week, remember, you matter, your goals matter, and it's really up to you to make them happen. Take good care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.